Before the sun even thought about rising, she was already on her feet. The night had been quiet, just the soft breathing of her 2 children asleep on a thin mattress in the corner, and the occasional rustle of a stray cat outside. But she didn't need an alarm clock. Her body knew. Hunger, worry, and love had trained her to wake before dawn. She tiptoed past the sleeping kids, careful not to make a sound. The floor was cold under her bare feet, but she barely noticed. In the tiny kitchen, really just a shelf with a kettle and a few chipped bowls, she lit the small stove and warmed water in a dented pot. Steam curled into the air as she dipped a cloth into it, wrung it out, and pressed it to her temples. Just for a second. Just to gather herself. Outside, the world was still dark, but she had work to do. Piles of clothes waited in woven baskets near the back door. Shirts, school uniforms, trousers, and dresses brought by neighbors and clients who paid her just enough to keep the lights on. She carried the baskets to the concrete slab behind the house where a rusted tap dripped water into a wide plastic tub. Kneeling on the worn mat, she filled the tub, added a spoonful of cheap detergent, and began scrubbing. Her hands moved fast, rubbing collars, twisting sleeves, pounding stubborn stains against the stone edge. Blisters had long since turned into thick skin, but her knuckles still ached, especially in the cold. She didn't complain. Complaining wouldn't pay the school fees due next week. Complaining wouldn't bring back the man who used to sit beside her on this very slab, joking as he helped fold laundry after his night shift. He'd been gone 2 years now. A sudden fever, then silence. No warning, no goodbye. Just her, 2 small children, and a mountain of bills that kept growing no matter how hard she climbed. She paused for a moment, glancing toward the window. Through the thin curtain, she could see the outline of her daughter's small frame curled around her younger brother. They'd been so brave, never asking for toys or new shoes, never saying, "Why don't we have what others have?" But she saw it in their eyes, the way her son watched other boys with footballs, the way her daughter smoothed her frayed school dress before walking out the door. School. That was the one thing she refused to let go. Education was their ticket out, she told herself every single day. Even if it meant washing clothes until her back screamed. Even if it meant skipping meals so they could eat. Even if it meant selling the last piece of jewelry her own mother had left her. A thin gold chain with a tiny charm, worn smooth from years of love. She'd done it just yesterday. Walked to the small shop near the market, handed it over without looking at the owner's face. The money she got wasn't much, but it covered half the term's fees. The other half? She'd figure it out. She always did. As the sky began to lighten, birds started chirping from the mango tree in the yard. She rinsed the last shirt, wrung it tight, and hung it on the line. The damp fabric flapped gently in the morning breeze. For a moment, she let herself imagine a different life, one where she didn't have to count every naira, where she could sit with her children at the table and eat without wondering if there'd be enough tomorrow. But dreams didn't wash clothes. Dreams didn't fill school forms, so she pushed the thought away and reached for the next basket. Later that morning, after the children left for school, her daughter holding her brother's hand tightly, both in clean uniforms she'd ironed late into the night, she sat on the step with a cup of weak tea. Her neighbor, an older woman with kind eyes and a limp from an old injury, shuffled over with a small plate of fried plantains. "You look tired, my dear," the woman said softly, placing the plate beside her. "I'm fine," she replied, forcing a smile. "Just a long night." The neighbor didn't push. She just sat quietly for a while, watching the laundry flutter like flags of survival. Then she said, "You know, your girl wrote something beautiful in school last week." The teacher read it aloud. Said it made her cry. She looked up, surprised. "What did she write?" "Something about hands," the neighbor said, patting her own wrinkled palm. Said her mother's hands are rough from work, but they're the softest thing she knows because they hold her when she's scared. A lump rose in her throat. She looked down at her own hands, red, cracked, stained with soap and sweat. She'd never thought of them as anything but tools, but to her child they were comfort, safety, love. She blinked fast, swallowing hard. "She's a good girl," she whispered. "Yes," the neighbor said. "And you're a good mother. Don't forget that." After the neighbor left, she sat there longer than she should have. The sun climbed higher, warming her shoulders. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel alone. Not completely, but reality returned with the afternoon heat. Another load of laundry came in, this time from a new client, a woman who lived in one of the big houses near the main road. The clothes were expensive: silk blouses, tailored suits, delicate lace. She handled them with extra care, knowing one tear could mean no pay, maybe even a scolding. As she scrubbed a wine stain from a white blouse, her mind drifted to the school office. The clerk had been polite but firm. "Fees must be paid in full by Friday, or your children will be asked to stay home." Friday was 2 days away. She still needed 3,000 naira. Where would it come from? She thought about asking her brother for help, but he had his own family to feed. She thought about taking on night cleaning work, but who would watch the kids? She thought about pawning her husband's old watch, the only thing she hadn't sold, but it was broken, and no one would take it. That night, after tucking the children in and whispering prayers over their heads, she sat on the floor of her room back against the wall. The house was quiet again. She pulled out the small notebook where she kept track of debts and payments. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote, still short. "God, please. Just a little more time." She didn't cry, not yet. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford in the middle of the week. But later, when she was sure the children were deep in sleep, she let a few silent ones fall into her lap. They weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of exhaustion, of love stretched thin, of a heart trying its best to hold everything together. And still, before she lay down on her thin mat, she checked the laundry lines one last time. Every piece was dry. Every piece was clean. Tomorrow she'd deliver them, collect her pay, and keep walking. Because stopping wasn't an option, not when 2 small lives depended on her next step. The moon shone through the window, casting a silver stripe across the floor. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and she closed her eyes, already preparing to rise before the sun again. Life went on, one wash at a time. Days melted into weeks, and the rhythm of scrubbing, rinsing, and hanging clothes became as steady as her heartbeat. She didn't expect anything to change. She'd stopped waiting for miracles long ago. Miracles were for people with time to spare, not for those counting coins to buy a single cup of Gary. But sometimes, kindness finds you when you're too tired to look for it. It started with the laundry baskets. One morning, she found an extra bundle tied neatly with twine outside her gate. More clothes than usual, wrapped in a clean cloth. No note, no name. Just a small envelope tucked inside with a little more money than the work was worth. She frowned, wondering if it was a mistake. But the next week it happened again. And the week after that, she asked around, but no one claimed it. Then she noticed the old woman who lived 2 houses down, the one with silver hair and a walking stick, watching her from her porch more often. One afternoon, as she carried a basket back from delivering clean clothes, the woman called out softly, "Child, come sit a moment." She hesitated, then walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. "You've been working too hard," the woman said, handing her a glass of Zobo. "I see you before sunrise and after sunset. Even on Sundays. I have to," she replied quietly. "School fees." "You know how it is," the woman nodded slowly. "I was a teacher once. Principal, actually. Saw many mothers like you, strong, silent, carrying the world on their backs." She paused, then added, "Those extra bundles? They're from me. I don't need all that washed, but I have the money and you have the hands. Let's call it an arrangement." She opened her mouth to protest, but the woman held up a gentle hand. "No pride here, my dear. Just 2 women helping each other in the way we can." Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Thank you," she whispered. It wasn't just the money. It was being seen, truly seen. Around the same time, something else began to stir, quietly like a seed pushing through dry soil. Her daughter had come home one day with a crumpled sheet of paper, eyes shining. "Mama, my teacher said my essay won first place in the whole district." She smoothed the paper carefully. The title read, "The Hands That Hold My Future." As she read, her breath caught. Her daughter had written about her. About the early mornings, the red knuckles, the way she always made sure their uniforms were spotless even when her own dress had holes. "My mama's hands are rough," the essay said, "but when she holds me, I feel like I'm wrapped in sunshine. She doesn't have much, but she gives everything. That's why I study hard, so one day I can give her rest." She read it 3 times, then folded it gently and tucked it into the pocket of her dress, right over her heart. A few days later, the school posted the winning essays on their notice board. A parent took a photo and shared it on social media. Someone else shared it again, then again. Within a week, the words had traveled far beyond their neighborhood, shared by teachers, journalists, even a popular radio host who read it on air during the morning drive time. She didn't know any of this at first. She was too busy washing another load, her mind on how to stretch the last of the rice for 3 meals. But then her phone, a cracked second-hand one, began to buzz with messages from people she barely knew. "Is this your daughter? Your story moved me. Can I help?" She didn't understand. She'd never posted anything online. She barely used the phone except to call the school or her brother. Then a young woman from a local news station showed up at her gate, holding a microphone and a warm smile. "We heard about your daughter's essay," she said gently. "And about you. Would you be willing to talk? Just a short interview. We want people to see the kind of strength that doesn't make headlines, but should." She hesitated. Cameras made her nervous. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. But then she thought of her children. If this could help them, if it could open even one door, wasn't it worth a few minutes of discomfort? She agreed. The interview happened in her yard, under the same mango tree where she often sat during breaks. She wore her best dress, the one with the small tear she'd carefully stitched, and held her daughter's hand the whole time. She didn't speak in grand words. She just told the truth, how she missed her husband, how scared she was some days, how she cried when no one was looking, but how she kept going because her children's dreams were bigger than her fears. She didn't ask for anything. Not once, she just said, "I want them to learn." That's all. When the clip aired, something unexpected happened. People didn't just feel sorry for her, they were inspired. Donations began arriving at the school. Notebooks, shoes, even a brand new school bag for her son. A local tailor offered to make new uniforms for both children. A retired nurse brought vitamins and checked the kids' health for free. Most surprising of all, a woman from a community foundation knocked on her door one afternoon. "We support mothers who are fighting to keep their children in school," she explained. "We'd like to help, with fees, books, maybe even a small stipend so you don't have to work quite so hard." She listened, stunned. "Why us?" she asked. "Because your daughter's words reminded us what really matters," the woman said. "And because you never gave up even when no one was watching." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. Not wild, soaring hope, but the quiet kind that whispers, "Maybe things can get a little easier." She used the first donation strictly for school fees. Every naira, she refused to spend it on herself, even though her sandals were splitting at the sole. When someone offered to buy her a new pair, she smiled and said, "Not yet. Let the children eat well first." But she did start doing something new. While the other women in her compound gathered to wash clothes in the shared yard, she began teaching them simple reading and writing during breaks. "If we can read," she told them, "we can fill out forms, understand medicine labels, help our children with homework." They gathered around her like students, eager and grateful. She wasn't a teacher, but she knew enough, and she knew what it felt like to be left behind. One afternoon, as she wrote the alphabet in the dust with a stick, her daughter watched from the doorway, eyes wide with pride. Later, the girl whispered, "Mama, you're like a real teacher now." She laughed softly. "No, my love. I'm just a mother who wants better for you." But deep down, something had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was planting seeds, and she didn't know it yet. But those seeds were about to bloom in ways she never imagined. Ways that would bring not just help, but honor. Rolling toward her in a line of black cars on a quiet Tuesday morning. But that was still ahead. For now, she hung the last shirt on the line, watched the sun dip behind the rooftops, and called her children in for dinner. The meal was simple, stew and yam, but their laughter filled the room like music. And for the first time in a long time, she ate without counting bites. She just ate, and smiled, and let herself believe just for tonight that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't carrying the weight alone anymore. The days kept turning, but something had changed. It wasn't just that there was a little more food on the table, or that her children's shoes no longer pinched their toes. It was the way people looked at her now, not with pity, but with respect. Neighbors greeted her warmly, shopkeepers slipped an extra onion into her bag, and the school headmistress always made time to speak with her, not as a struggling parent, but as someone whose voice mattered. Still, she stayed careful. She'd seen how quickly good fortune could vanish like smoke in the wind. So she saved every extra coin, used donations only for the children's schooling, and kept washing clothes. Not because she had to anymore, but because it was part of who she was. Work wasn't just survival, it was dignity. Then came the phone call. A woman's voice, calm and kind, introduced herself as a producer from a national talk show. "We'd love to have you and your daughter on our program," she said. "Your story has touched so many people. We think it could give hope to others going through the same thing." Her first instinct was to say no. Cameras, bright lights, strangers asking personal questions, it made her stomach twist. But that night, as she watched her daughter carefully copy math problems into a new notebook, donated by a teacher who'd seen the news clip, she thought about all the mothers out there scrubbing clothes in silence, wondering if anyone sees them. Maybe this wasn't just about her. Maybe it was about them too. She said yes. The day of the show, she wore the same mended dress, but this time she didn't feel ashamed. Her daughter braided her hair neatly, and her son polished her worn sandals with oil until they almost shone. They took a bus to the city center, hearts pounding with nervous excitement. Inside the studio, everything was brighter, louder, faster than she expected. But the host, a woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile, greeted them like old friends. "You don't have to be perfect," she whispered before they went on air. "Just be you." And so she was. She spoke slowly at first, hands folded in her lap, voice soft. But as she talked about waking before dawn, about selling her last piece of jewelry, about reading her daughter's essay and crying into her apron, her words grew stronger. She didn't beg. She didn't dramatize. She just told the truth, plain and simple. When her daughter read the essay aloud on stage, the entire studio fell silent. Even the crew stopped moving. A few people wiped their eyes. Afterward, the host turned to the audience and said, "This is what courage looks like. Not in headlines, but in laundry lines and school gates." The broadcast aired that evening. By morning, her life tilted again, this time faster. Messages flooded in from across the country. A university student offered to tutor her children for free. A small business owner sent a package of school supplies and a note. "You inspire me to work harder." A women's group in another state started a fundraiser, not just for her, but for 5 other single mothers in their own community, using her story as a spark. Most surprising of all, the local education office reached out. "We've reviewed your case," an official said gently. "Based on your daughter's academic performance and your commitment, we're approving a partial scholarship for both children. It covers books, uniforms, and exam fees for the next 2 years." She couldn't speak for a full minute. When she finally did, all she said was, "Thank you. I'll make sure they use this chance well." But she didn't stop there. With the small stipend from the foundation and the extra help from neighbors, she began something new. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon after the morning washes were done, she cleared a corner of the yard, laid out old mats, and invited the women from her compound to sit. She brought chalk, a small blackboard someone had donated, and notebooks made from scrap paper. "Today we learned to write your name," she'd say, "then your child's name, then numbers, so you know if someone is cheating you at the market." At first only 2 or 3 came, but soon more joined, women who'd never held a pen, who'd been told they were too old to learn. They laughed when they made mistakes, helped each other sound out letters, and celebrated when one of them wrote her full name for the first time. One woman, older than the rest, cried quietly and said, "Now I can sign my own name on my child's school form. I won't have to ask a stranger anymore." That moment hit her deep. This wasn't just about reading. It was about power, about standing tall. Meanwhile, her own children thrived. Her son, once shy and quiet, began raising his hand in class. Her daughter joined the school debate club and came home buzzing with new words and ideas. "Mama," she said one evening, "I want to be a lawyer, so I can help people like us." She hugged her tight. "Then I'll wash 1,000 more loads to get you there." One afternoon, as she hung freshly cleaned sheets, the old woman from down the street hobbled over with a thermos of tea. "You've started something beautiful," she said, nodding toward the group of women practicing letters under the tree. "I'm just doing what I can," she replied. "No," the woman said firmly. "You're showing them that their hands can do more than scrub. They can write. They can build. They can dream." She thought about that all evening. Maybe she hadn't just been washing clothes all this time. Maybe she'd been washing away shame, fear, the idea that poor women had no voice, and in its place she was helping others find their own. Then, just as she was starting to believe things might stay calm for a while, something extraordinary happened. A government vehicle pulled up outside her gate one Tuesday morning. Not a flashy car, just a plain sedan with official plates. A man in a neat uniform stepped out holding an envelope. Her heart jumped. Was it bad news? Had she missed a form? Forgotten a payment? But the man smiled. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm from the Ministry of Women Affairs. We've been following your story. The minister would like to meet you." She stared, speechless. "She's been deeply moved by your strength and your efforts to educate other mothers. There's an honor coming your way." He didn't say more, just handed her the envelope. Thick, cream-colored, sealed with an official stamp, and drove off. She stood there, the envelope trembling in her hands, laundry forgotten on the line behind her. Honor, for her? She'd never been called for anything official in her life except maybe a bill reminder. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept imagining officials asking her questions she couldn't answer, or worse, making a mistake in front of important people. But her daughter, sensing her worry, curled up beside her and said, "Mama, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. That's why they want to see you." She kissed her forehead. "You're wiser than I am, my love." The next morning she washed her best dress again, stitched the loose button one more time, and braided her hair the way her mother used to. She didn't know what was coming. But she knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened, she wouldn't hide who she was. The woman who washed clothes. The mother who refused to let go. The teacher under the mango tree. And soon, very soon, a line of black SUVs would roll down her quiet street, and everything would change once more. But this time she wouldn't be afraid, because she'd already proven, to herself and to the world, that her worth wasn't in what she owned, but in what she gave. The morning started like any other. She woke before sunrise, boiled water for tea, and checked the laundry lines to see if last night's rain had dampened the clean clothes. Everything was dry. Good. She had deliveries to make by 10. Her children were already dressed. School uniforms crisp, shoes polished, hair neatly combed. They ate their breakfast quietly, excited about a science project at school. She watched them, heart full, and thought how far they'd come. No more torn hems, no more skipping meals, just ordinary mornings filled with ordinary hopes. She was hanging a fresh load, brightly colored wrappers and school shirts, when she heard it. The low rumble of engines, deeper and smoother than the usual honking of buses or the sputter of Okadas. She turned, wiping her hands on her apron. Down the dusty road, a line of black SUVs rolled slowly toward her gate. 4 of them, windows tinted, flags fluttering on the hoods. People in the street stopped walking. Neighbors peered out from windows. A chicken scurried across the road, startled. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't for her. It couldn't be. Important people didn't come to streets like this, narrow, unpaved, lined with zinc roofs and laundry lines. They went to government offices, big hotels, fancy neighborhoods with gates and guards. But the convoy slowed, then stopped. Right outside her house, doors opened. Men in dark suits stepped out, followed by women in crisp traditional attire. And then, she recognized her from television, the Minister of Women Affairs herself, tall and graceful, stepping onto the red earth in polished shoes. The woman walked straight to the gate, not waiting for anyone to open it. She pushed it gently and smiled. "Good morning," she said, her voice warm, not at all like the stern voices on the news. She stood frozen for a second, soap still on her fingers, barefoot on the concrete step. Good morning, Ma," she managed. The minister's eyes softened. "You don't need to be nervous. We're here because of you, because of your courage, because of what you've done, not just for your children but for your community." Behind the minister, cameras clicked softly. Officials stood respectfully back. Her children, drawn by the commotion, peeked from the doorway, eyes wide. The minister turned to them. "Are these the ones?" she asked gently. She nodded, calling them over. They came slowly, holding hands. The minister knelt right there in the dust and spoke to them like they were the most important people in the country. "Your mother is a hero," she told them. "Never forget that." Then she stood and faced her again. "We've read your daughter's essay. We've seen the photos of you teaching other mothers how to read. We've heard from your neighbors, your school, the foundation that supports you. You've carried so much with such grace. Today we honor you." She handed her a certificate, thick paper embossed with the national seal, for the National Award for Maternal Resilience and Educational Advocacy. The crowd that had gathered, neighbors, street vendors, even the local tailor, began to clap. Not loud or showy, but steady, proud. But the minister wasn't done. Because of your example, she continued, the ministry, in partnership with the National Education Trust Fund, is granting full scholarships for both your children, from primary school all the way through university. Every fee, every book, every uniform covered. Her breath caught. She looked at her children, then back at the minister. All the way to university? Yes, the minister said firmly. They deserve that chance, and you deserve to see them take it without worry. Then came the second gift. We're also approving a community grant, the minister said, to help you start what you've already begun. A learning and support center for single mothers. A place where they can work, learn, and care for their children all in one space. We'll provide the seed funding, materials, and training. You'll lead it. She couldn't speak. Tears welled up, but she blinked them back fast. Not from sadness, from disbelief. This was more than she'd ever dreamed. She'd only wanted her children to stay in school. Now others would get that chance too. A local reporter stepped forward gently. Can you say a few words? She looked around, at the faces of the women who'd sat with her under the mango tree, at her children standing tall, at the minister who'd come all this way just for her. She took a breath. I never thought washing clothes could lead to this, she said, voice trembling but clear. I just wanted my children to learn. But if my small effort can help other mothers, then every sore hand, every sleepless night was worth it. Thank you for seeing us, for remembering that even the quietest voices matter. The crowd clapped again, louder this time. Someone shouted, "We proud of you." Another called out, "Our own hero." Later, after the motorcade left and the street returned to its usual rhythm, she sat on her step with her children. They held the scholarship letters like treasure. Her son traced the official stamp with his finger. Her daughter whispered, "Mama, does this mean I really can be a lawyer?" "Yes," she said, pulling them close. "It means you can be anything." That evening, the whole compound celebrated. Neighbors brought jollof rice, fried fish, and cold drinks. Children played in the yard while women gathered around her, not as students now, but as partners. "So it's really happening?" one asked. "The center?" "Yes," she said. "And you'll all be part of it. We'll build it together." As the sun set, painting the sky in gold and pink, she stood by the laundry line, now empty for once, and looked at her hands. They were still rough, still marked by years of work, but now they held something new. Possibility. She thought of all the mornings she'd risen in the dark, wondering if she could make it through the day. She thought of the nights she'd cried silently, afraid she wasn't enough. And now here she was, honored not for being perfect, but for being present. For showing up day after day with love as her only weapon against despair. The motorcade was gone, but its echo remained, not in noise, but in hope. And as she watched her children laugh with their friends under the fading light, she knew this wasn't the end of the struggle. Life would still have hard days, but now she wasn't walking alone. She was leading, and that made all the difference. 1 year later, the sound that filled the yard wasn't just the slap of wet fabric against stone. It was laughter, the scratch of chalk on a board, the hum of children reading aloud, and the steady rhythm of sewing machines clicking in the back room. What had once been a patch of bare earth behind a small house was now Amina's haven, though she never liked calling it that. To her it was just the center, but to everyone else, it was a lifeline. The building wasn't grand, just a single-story structure with bright blue walls, a tin roof and wide windows that let in plenty of light. It had been built with the government grant, but shaped by the hands of the women who used it. They'd mixed the cement, painted the walls, even planted the hibiscus bushes out front. Every brick carried their fingerprints. Inside, the space was divided simply. One side for laundry, large tubs, drying racks, and clean water taps. The other for learning, low tables, secondhand books, and a small corner with mats where toddlers napped while their mothers worked or studied. In the back, a vocational room held sewing machines donated by a local tailors' guild. Women came not just to wash clothes, but to learn how to stitch school uniforms, make bags, even design simple dresses they could sell at the market. She still washed clothes, every morning without fail. But now she trained others as she worked. "See how I twist the sleeve?" she'd say, showing a young mother how to remove tough stains without tearing the fabric. Gentle pressure, not force. Like raising children, firm but kind. The women listened. They trusted her because she hadn't changed. She still wore simple dresses, still walked to the market with a basket on her head, still checked on each child in the learning pod before heading home. Fame hadn't lifted her above them. It had rooted her deeper among them. Her own children thrived. Her daughter now tutored younger kids at the center after school, patient and bright-eyed, already sounding like a teacher herself. Her son, once too shy to speak in class, now stood proudly at the front during assembly, reciting poems about courage and home. Their school reports came back with glowing remarks, and the scholarship covered everything. No more sleepless nights over fees. But the real joy wasn't in the awards or the clean uniforms. It was in the small moments. The day a woman who'd never written her name signed her child's report card without help. The afternoon a teenage mother, barely older than her daughter, stitched her first complete dress and sold it for enough to buy rice for a week. The evening when 5 women sat together, sharing a pot of soup, talking not about survival, but about dreams, opening a stall, going back to secondary school, sending their children to university. She watched it all with quiet pride. This was what she'd wanted. Not just a way out for her own family, but a path forward for others. Every year, on the same Tuesday in October, the motorcade returned. Not with fanfare, but with respect. The minister came, not in a suit, but in a simple wrapper and blouse, and spent the whole morning sitting on the floor with the children, listening to them read. Officials brought new books, art supplies, sometimes even solar lamps so the women could study after dark. Reporters came too, but they didn't push for dramatic stories anymore. They just documented the quiet miracle happening in this ordinary yard. Women lifting each other up. One wash, one word, one stitch at a time. On the most recent visit, the minister stood before the group and said, "People ask me what real change looks like. I tell them, come here. Change isn't always loud. Sometimes it starts with a mother washing clothes so her child can learn to read, and then teaching others to read too." After the officials left, the women gathered under the mango tree, the same one that had shaded her during her loneliest days. Now it shaded a circle of hope. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the walls gold, she stayed behind to tidy up. Her daughter helped her stack the books. Her son swept the floor, humming a song from school. In the learning corner, a little girl, no older than 4, sat cross-legged, tracing letters in a notebook. She looked up and smiled. "Auntie, is this right?" She knelt beside her. "Yes, my dear. That's a perfect A." The child beamed, then carefully wrote another letter. "For my mama. She's learning too." Her throat tightened. She patted the girl's head and stood, brushing dust from her knees. Outside, the first stars blinked awake. The laundry lines were empty. Everything clean, dry, ready for tomorrow. She walked to the gate and looked down the quiet road. It was the same street where she'd once walked with her head down, ashamed of her worn shoes and empty pockets. Now she walked with her shoulders back, not because she had everything, but because she knew her worth wasn't tied to what she owned. Her hands were still rough. The cracks never fully healed. But now those hands didn't just scrub. They taught, they built, they held space for others to grow. And every callus was a reminder. Love in action leaves marks. But those marks can become maps for others to follow. Later, as she lay on her mat that night, listening to the soft breathing of her children in the next room, she thought about the journey. The fear, the tears, the days she thought she'd break. And then, the unexpected kindness, the words of a child, the courage to say yes when the world finally noticed. She hadn't asked for a motorcade. She'd only asked for a chance. And in giving that chance to others, she'd found something even greater. Peace. Outside, a night bird called. Somewhere, a baby cried, then quieted. Life went on. Not perfect, not easy, but full. And in that fullness, she found rest. Because she knew now. She wasn't just surviving. She was sowing. And the harvest was already blooming all around her. In the laughter of children. In the steady hands of mothers learning to write their names. In the quiet dignity of a place where no one had to choose between clean clothes and a child's future. And that, she thought as sleep finally came, was more than enough. The story wasn't supposed to have a part 6. After all, the motorcade had come, the center was built, the children were thriving. Wasn't that the happy ending? But life doesn't wrap itself in neat bows. It keeps unfolding quietly, stubbornly, beautifully. And sometimes the most powerful chapters begin long after the cameras leave. 2 years after Amina's Haven opened its doors, something unexpected happened. Not with fanfare, but with a knock on the gate one rainy afternoon. A young woman stood there drenched, holding a baby wrapped in a thin shawl. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders slumped, but her voice was steady. "I heard this is a place for mothers like me," she said. "I don't have much, but I want to learn, and I want my child to go to school." She recognized that look instantly, the mix of fear and fierce love. It was the same look she'd seen in the mirror for years. Without a word, she opened the gate wider. "Come in," she said. "You're safe here." That young woman became the first of many who came not just from the neighborhood but from towns hours away. Word had spread. If you're a mother with nothing but hope, there's a place where you can wash, learn, and build a future without shame. Some arrived with toddlers clinging to their skirts. Others came alone, having lost everything but their will to try again. The center grew, not in size but in heart. They added a small dormitory room with donated mattresses for those who had nowhere to sleep. A retired nurse volunteered once a week to check on babies and teach basic health lessons. A local farmer began dropping off sacks of yam and beans every month. No one asked for receipts. No one kept score. They just gave what they could because someone once gave them a chance. She still rose before dawn. But now, instead of washing alone in silence, she was often joined by others. Women who wanted to start early so they could attend the morning literacy class. They worked side by side, scrubbing, rinsing, talking softly about everything and nothing. A child's fever, a difficult landlord, a dream of opening a small shop. The laundry area became more than a workplace. It became a sanctuary where burdens were shared and lightened. One morning, as she hung a row of school uniforms, her daughter walked over with a stack of notebooks. "Mama," she said, "the new girls are ready for their reading lesson." She smiled. Her daughter, now 14, had taken over the beginner's class. She taught with the same patience her mother used when showing how to fold a shirt just right. Gentle, clear, full of encouragement. Watching her, she felt a swell of pride so deep it almost hurt. This was the cycle she'd hoped for, not just survival, but legacy. Later that week, a surprise visitor arrived, not in a motorcade but on foot, leaning on a cane. It was the old woman from down the street, the one who'd first left extra laundry at her gate. She'd grown frailer, but her eyes still sparkled. "I came to see what you've built," she said, looking around the center with quiet awe. "You helped build it," she replied, guiding her to a shaded bench. "If you hadn't seen me when no one else did, none of this would be here." The old woman patted her hand. "I only gave you a little. You turned it into a river." That night, as rain pattered on the roof, she sat with the women in the main room, sharing a pot of warm pap. One of them, a mother who'd arrived just months ago, barely able to write her name, held up a small cloth bag she'd sewn. "I sold 3 today at the market," she said, voice trembling with pride. "Enough to buy medicine for my boy." Another added, "My daughter passed her entrance exam for secondary school. First in her class, they didn't cheer loudly. They didn't need to. Their smiles said everything." In this room, success wasn't measured in wealth, but in dignity regained, in children walking taller, in mothers who finally believed they mattered. But not every day was easy. There were weeks when the water pump broke or the roof leaked or a woman showed up with bruises she wouldn't talk about. On those days, the weight felt heavy again. Yet now she didn't carry it alone. The women formed a circle, literally and figuratively, around anyone in pain. They cooked meals, watched each other's children, stayed up late listening. They'd learned that healing wasn't a solo journey. One afternoon, while sorting donated books, she found a familiar sheet of paper tucked inside an old novel. It was her daughter's essay, "The Hands That Hold My Future," slightly yellowed at the edges. Someone had kept it all this time. She traced the words with her finger, remembering the night she'd cried over it in silence. Now that same essay was pinned on the center's wall, copied by hand, read aloud to every new woman who walked through the door. It had become their anthem. A few months later, the minister returned, not for a ceremony, but for a quiet visit. She came without cameras, sat on the floor with the children, and helped sew buttons onto practice dolls in the vocational room. Before she left, she pulled her aside. You know, she said, we've started 3 more centers in other states modeled after this one. All because of you, she shook her head. Not because of me. Because of all of us, the minister smiled. Sometimes one spark is all it takes. As the years passed, the center became more than a project, it became a home. Girls who once napped on the mats now helped teach younger ones. Women who'd learned to read now helped others fill out job applications. Even her son, now in secondary school, came on weekends to fix broken chairs or tutor boys in math. And through it all, she remained the same, still washing clothes, still checking on every child, still wearing her mended dresses. Fame never changed her. If anything, it made her more humble. She knew the truth. She wasn't special. She was just a mother who refused to let go. And that, it turned out, was enough to change everything. One evening, as she stood by the gate watching the sunset, her daughter joined her. "Mama," she said softly, "do you ever miss the old days?" She thought for a moment. "I miss your father," she said honestly. But not the fear, not the loneliness. Her daughter leaned her head on her shoulder. "I'm glad the world saw you." She kissed the top of her head. "The world didn't save us, my love. We saved each other. One wash, one word, one heart at a time." And as the first stars appeared in the sky, she knew the story wasn't over. It never would be. Because as long as there were mothers willing to rise before dawn for their children, as long as there were hands willing to lift others up, hope would keep blooming, quietly, powerfully, right here in the dust.